So today I'm going to discuss with you the Every Child Student Succeeds Act. And as we uh, are in 2017 and we have a brand new Congress and a brand new president, um, portions of this law may change at some point. But at this point in time, this is the law of our land and for education, one of them. And it does replace the No Child Left Behind Act. So let's take a look at what this means, and I'll focus a bit on Pennsylvania because that's where I'm sitting right now. But certainly this is a federal law, so it covers the whole United States, and then individual states will write the regulations to implement this law. So the background is that it was signed by President Obama, and it is essentially reauthorizing a very I don't want to say old law, but it reauthorizes the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And this particular act of 1965 has been reauthorized a number of times. One of those times being the No Child Left Behind Act, which we know that was put into place, signed into place by President Bush in 2004. So this particular law, again, is a federal law, and it replaces NCLB. And it provides a bit more flexibility, but there's a lot of components of the law that you as teachers will have heard before and understand. So let's get into the overview. So what is it? It builds on this particular Congress and president felt that and believes that this law builds on key areas of progress that was made, primarily to support education, communities, parents, and educators. The key elements of this particular act, again, we've nothing new. We've heard about accountability that's been in place since NCLB. We've heard about addressing low performing schools and school interventions and testing and standards. So all of those components are still written into the law. We're transitioning, though, from the No Child Left Behind Act, and so the Every Student Succeeds Act really is seen as a act that um, is more positive. So you'll see some language in the law that talks more about supporting teachers and schools in doing their jobs. But there is a strong emphasis on ELL, English language learner students, as there was in the past law, children with disabilities, and supporting teachers as well as funding. So, what are the differences? So, the main difference between ESSA and NCLB is the way standards are set and tracked. States are still required to do the testing, but there's more flexibility in how and when the tests are given. So, that's really new and that's pretty powerful. NCLB, as we know, was criticized for harsh testing procedures and processes. Under NCLB, school systems could fulfill the law's requirements by teaching students to do well on required examinations. But this doesn't mean instructing to the test, so to say. It ensures that states still set high standards and maintain accountability for things like dropout rates and low performing schools. There's more empowerment at the local level. It preserves, as already stated, the assessments, provides more children access to high quality preschool, which is great, and establishes new resources for districts. So the focus still remains on the testing and accountability and education preparation for our teachers as well as evaluation of teachers. In Pennsylvania, um, learners will be prepared for meaningful engagement in post-secondary education. So there's a strong emphasis in what happens after high school. Again, trying to reduce dropout rates, trying to prepare students for moving on. So we're looking at, again, a continuum, college and career readiness, really addressing vulnerable students, and being transparent on our data in terms of how our school's doing in terms of the testing. So for Pennsylvania, um, again, continuing that process of transitioning from school to the work or academic environment, or both. Um, newer flexibility for local school districts, targeted support for those schools that are struggling. So not a punishment type of action, which was really part of NCLB, but also supporting schools as well as reporting underperforming schools. And state accountability systems must incorporate academic outcomes and learning opportunities. So, in terms of Pennsylvania, really they're trying to address the day to day needs of the schools and who's involved in the schools. So, for assessment, there is a work group that's formed. Again, we have to have solid regulations so that the schools know how to implement this law. So, they're exploring options for reducing test time, decreasing turnaround time for feedback, and administering assessments later in the year while attending to policies and practices that support fair and valid testing. An accountability work groups exploring opportunities to develop valid measures of student growth and indicators that control for mitigating out of school factors such as poverty. So we know that certain variables impact how children are going to do. And so they're really looking at, how do we remove those variables and still consider that children are getting what they need and learning. Teacher certification is always a discussion, and so there's a work group exploring how to identify avenues to place effective teachers in classrooms, and that's difficult to define. What makes an effective teacher, but certainly it's something that they're working on. And how do you evaluate teachers fairly? What do you look at? How do you support teachers to do their jobs well? We know that in some areas, particularly urban and rural, there's teacher shortages, and there's projected teacher shortages for the future years. There are some resources here for you, so take a look, and take a look at your state's regulations as well.